Good morning, Maui. Hey, you're back with Coach Scott today, filling in for Jason. Jason's doing really good. He's on the mend, and hopefully we'll have him back in the studio in not too long while he does his little rehab for his new body parts. We're really excited that Jason's getting some long overdue needed repairs. So everybody, last week we dove deep into the Federalist Papers. We talked about, hey, how did the Supreme Court, how did this country get put together? We looked at the Federalist Papers, what Adams, what Jefferson, what Ellsworth, what Monroe were all thinking, and how we came up with our form of government. The week before that, we went into the 17th Amendment, which redefined how our states were organized and how they elected their upper house, which is the senators, and brought them to Washington, D.C. We have gone in depth to all those things. I've got some really interesting questions that you guys sent to me over this last week after listening to our thing there, our cast. Some of you were asking, well, what was this big deal about Roe v. Wade last year? What was that whole Supreme Court thing? Why was the Supreme Court dealing with Roe v. Wade? So in that case, which was really more about states' rights, it really didn't name Roe v. Wade. It was brought in light of Roe v. Wade, but it was brought to the Supreme Court is who is in control of the state? Is it the federal government? Or is it the state that has jurisdiction over what goes on within its borders? This has been an ongoing paradigm that has been going on now for about the last 100 years, since in 1912, the 17th Amendment, where instead of our senators that were going to Washington, D.C., being appointed by the state legislatures, they were elected by the individual peoples. Okay, going back to that, we have been slowly chiseling away at states' rights with multiple Supreme Court cases over the last 100 years. Here in Hawaii, it has become ever and ever more obvious that our states' rights need to be reaffirmed like they do everywhere else in the country. When Monroe wrote and Jefferson wrote that the federal government should not overreach its powers into the operations within each state, within each union. We are a collection, we are a union of states. If you were getting on an elevator, would you like to get on an elevator that had one cable that went up and down? Or would you like to get on an elevator that had multiple cables lifting you up and bringing you to where you needed to go? The farther we get away from making sure that Mayor Bisson, Josh Green, and our council members can do the best they can for our state and our county, we need to keep focusing on reaffirming states' rights. That allows us to have multiple cables on our elevators, making sure we do not crash and fall to the ground. When our founders created and wrote the Constitution and its amendments and the Bill of Rights, they designed it with fail-safes. Well, Scott, what's a fail-safe? Let's go back to the elevator analogy. An elevator has multiple fail-safes so that you don't crash to the basement. It has cables. It has multiple cables. It doesn't have one cable. It has multiple cables, and it has systems put in place so that things don't crash and fall to the basement. Those things are reaffirmed in the 10th Amendment, allowing the states to create within their state a microcosm of how each of their individual jurisprudence operates. The state has one cable, let's say. Then we come down from the state. We have our individual counties. Those counties are on a cable, and we're all in the same elevator here, okay? Now we get down to the city level. We have another cable to keep us from falling through the floor. Very good. Then we have our local level. That's another cable that keeps us from crashing to the ground and keeps us functioning as a city, as a county, as a state, and as the United States, the United Union of States. So why is that important today, Scott? Well, we're under attack. There is many people that think that we just need to run on one cable. One cable. And that's going to be the best way and the most efficient way to run. So when Hawaii, we decide we don't want a telescope on our mountain, well, it doesn't matter. It's for the good of the country. That's wrong. If the people of Hawaii get together and say, this is a great idea, we should have a telescope up here, that would be wonderful. A lot of the people that worked on wanting to put the telescope up on the hill were great achievers within our state that went to college, became cosmetologists, and said, I'm going to get this telescope, we're going to put it up here, and I'm actually going to be able to work from home. That's really cool. But it wasn't presented. It was not presented to the people of Hawaii like that. It wasn't presented to us like that. It was forced down our throat, and that's not how things should work. We are the citizens of the state of Hawaii. We are members of our county, our island. We are members of our state. That's where, if the federal government wants to tell us something to do, it needs to come through these safety lines to make sure that everything is being met in the proper order. It's very important that we address this at all costs. When the authors of the Constitution, and their amendments wrote the Constitution, it wasn't a willy-nilly, we're going to sit in a classroom, like I mentioned before about the picture on the wall of the founding fathers getting together in a room and writing out a document. No, it was much, much more than that. It was deliberation. They went back and they read Phalangides, who was one of the Greek philosophers who was written about when they created the democratic republic system 3,000 years ago. Yes, it is an experiment, but it's been an experiment that was meticulously done to make sure that worst case scenario, the federal government, that one cord that's holding the elevator up, if that cord goes away, I completely believe that our state would be able to function completely independently with some adjustments. And that's by design. It's by design that if something happened to Oahu, God forbid, like did in December 7th, 1941, and it was much larger, that Mayor Bisson here and our county commissioners could well step up to the job to making sure our county was safe and kept functioning. That's by design, and that's how our country remains safe. It remains safe, it remains secure because of each level of government that we approve understands their responsibility. Their responsibility to me, to you, their responsibility to each other. Where are we going with this, Scott? We're going right back to the 17th Amendment. We need to ensure that all the elevator lines that are keeping us going up and down and getting where we need to go get us there safely. But constantly we keep relying more and more on one cable in that elevator that is our nation. We keep putting more and more to the federal government. So, folks that have sent, I'm reading some text here. So they said, well, if the federal government could run the schools, could run the roads, could run everything, could run our healthcare system. Well, Scott, we haven't tried that yet, they say. Here we go. Well, why don't we just let the federal government run healthcare, our roads, and making sure that we have all the services we need? And that's reiterated multiple times on people that are texting in. I said, Scott, it's so simple. Then you just have one entity. Why don't we try that? Why don't we try this? Well, let's wake up. We have tried that. We've been trying that for over 200 years. What are you talking about, Scott? We have been trying it on the Navajo Nations and on the native reservations all across the United States. That is a one cable system. They rely on the federal government for absolutely everything. Do you realize on the Navajo Nation, the largest reservation in the United States, that less than half of the households have running water? This is 2024, people. If you think the federal government can do it better, please reach out to a Native American living on a reservation in the United States of America and ask them how that's working out. Ask them what it's like to go to a federally funded medical clinic. Ask them what it's like to get a small smidge housing allotment. Ask them how that is and tell me if they're telling you that one cable, one entity delivering those services is working for them. It's not. It has never worked correctly. We need to empower our systems. We need to empower the Native American communities to reach more and more towards self-governance. Yes, they elect officers. Yes, they elect tribal elders and members that help control the inner workings of the tribal. But the federal government has put such constraints on our Native Americans that they can barely reach outside the box. They can't own their own property. Their own property was gifted to them when their ancestors or great-grandparents were moved onto the reservation. They can't build a house without appealing to the Navajo Nation or the Cherokee or any of the others. They have to appeal because the federal government pretty much keeps a thumb on them. We've been holding the Native Americans down. They're brilliant people. We've been experimenting with them on a single system of federal government controls everything, and it has not worked. It has failed. The highest alcoholic rate, the highest drug abuse, the worst drinking water of any single entity in the country is on the reservations of the United States of America. The worst food delivery systems, the worst healthcare systems, and absolutely the worst education systems. They get the leftovers, and nobody's saying anything. Why don't they say anything? Nobody's looking around. No, very few people have ever driven even into a reservation. I got to live 15 years in New Mexico while I was coaching there. And I learned so many wonderful things about such a beautiful culture. And yet I would see dilapidated homes. I would see very loving and open people that were very open-armed. It was just an amazing place. When the Jemez Pueblo, which was just down the road from me, I had quite a few friends down there. And when they would have festivals, it would be like an open door, of welcome arms once you were invited in. But then you would see the federal system and what we have done when we created these reservations. These reservations, let's wind back a little bit. Here we go. We have the end of the Civil War. We have Reconstruction. We were looking at, okay, everyone is free. There's no longer slavery. There's been emancipation. Do you know what was going on in the writings during emancipation and during the Emancipation Act and all that? There was a absolutely huge movement from the southern states to create reservations to take all the black people that were slaves in the southern states and put them on reservations. That was the plan. Anybody ever read that in your history books? Did you know that there was a plan by the federal government, by the Senate and the House during Reconstruction that was brought forth from the rejoining of the southern states to put all the black Americans onto reservations? Wow. People don't know this. We don't teach our kids history. Where did that go? Oh, interesting you should say, Scott. About 50 years ago, that one cable holding the elevator took over our educational systems, except for very few private systems. So all of a sudden, now we have a Department of Education running out of Washington, D.C. Do the people of Washington, D.C. know what's best for the people of Hana? I don't think so. Do the people in Washington, D.C. know what's best and how to teach our children here? I don't think so. And yet they still draw the big square, and you need to color within those perimeters to get money to pay your teachers. Let's go back to the elevator, Scott. If our education system, which is another part of what our county here does, we have wonderful schools here. I have friends that are teachers here or retired teachers here. And their struggles never talk about the children. They never talk about their students. They talk about the administration that has been passed down to them from the federal government, passed down to them from the federal government to the state and then to the classroom. I don't know anyone that goes into the teaching profession that says, I want to become a teacher so that I can actually fill out paperwork so that our schools can get funding. Today, if Washington, D.C. ceased to exist, if something happened to Oahu, our teachers could still go to school and they could still teach. They go to school for that. They have a heart for that. It's in their spirit to teach. That's what they're good at. That's why they went there. I've known, well, let me roll that back. I taught Red Cross swim instructors, first aid instructors for decades. And when you train a lifeguard, you'll know if they're working a city pool within about the first 3 weeks of their first summer working a swimming pool, whether they'll make it or not. Cool thing. You can just see that interaction between the youth that are playing in a swimming pool. They get it. They realize or they change their approach to make it work. Teachers are the same. You get a whole bunch of different Njitams. You have families that live up country. You have families that live in Wailuku. You have the Wailukans. You have the Lahainans. They all have a little bit different family vibe, but they come together in the schools and they need to learn. If this is the first time listening to me, again, I'm Scott Bushnell. I work for parents and children just one day a week. I teach anger management classes at MCCC at our correctional facility, and I teach an evening class at parents and children about how to control your anger or at least understand it. Understand it. And that's not easy for a lot of folks. What's really the heartbreaking moment for me, and it has been for a long time. As you also know, I and my past wife raised a lot of foster children. And some of the things I saw when I would go to the school, I had two of our boys, wonderful. We still talk, and their difficulty wasn't about getting along in school. Their difficulty was they were very hands-on learners. They were like, I can look at this, I can figure out, and I can fix it. And it was just absolutely glorious to see. But you sit them down in front of a computer and tell them to learn, it's like hitting them in the head with a hammer. This is exactly what I am seeing for the decades I've been going to the prison systems, to the juvenile correction systems across this country. We have been trying to pound our kiki into boxes where they don't fit. Well, Scott, why are you doing that? Why are we treating our education system like that? Because we've been forced into conformity. Teachers have amazing skills. They know that some learners are visual learners. They know some learners are auditory learners. They listen. Some learners that have to watch, and then they can figure it out. Other learners that have a combination of each. Everyone that has become a teacher knows this. But the federal government can't bring a program into place successfully over the last 50 years that can handle those kind of variables. No student left behind. Left behind more students than you can shake a stick at. I worked in a at-risk program not long after I was out. I was coaching in a little Oregon coast town, and I had a at-risk program at a little high school called Tillamook High School. And I had the classroom where kids that blew out did this, do whatever. And where I really saw this fruition, this was long before even my kids were born. Actually, my son Tyler was born at that time. Take that back. Before we had adopted Janelle, our first adopted. I was working this program, and I saw the greatest travesty of all times. They took out the shop class, woodworking. They took out the auto shop. They took out the drafting, and they took out home ec. And they replaced those with computer labs. If that wasn't the greatest mistake in my lifetime for teaching that I have ever seen. And we continuously do that. We keep forcing kids into a box. Scott, you started on anger management. How did we get here? You know what? When you go to school and you can't figure out that you're a round peg and all the squares that you need to go into, all the places you need to go are square, pretty soon your self-esteem gets shot to hell. You don't fit in because you don't know how to sit behind a computer and learn something. Does that make you stupid? No, it means the people who are forced to teach a certain way are not allowed to be able to teach you. They have to check the boxes and make sure that no child is left behind. The concept of that is brilliant. The application was horrible. Just horrible. So where are we going? Okay, now where are we at? Oh, I started on anger management classes that I have at the jail and the in-house classes that I do at Parents and Children Together. Very few, almost none of those folks aren't there because they felt like they fit in growing up. And the really the bigger travesty of all this is I was part of that educational process. I was blessed enough to go to Catholic school. So I got a formation that said, you're okay, you're smart, even though you have some dyslexic tendencies going on. I was able to get past that. The nuns made their adjustments for me. Sometimes when I would have to write a paper, I would go in and I would just have my notes and I would just talk like we're talking right now. And it worked for me. It worked that way for me in college as well. I was able to do dissertations and talk, and we would have this interaction with my professors to understand that I got the curriculum. But we have been forced into a box. We don't fit in a box. We just, a few short years ago, made sure that kids wore shoes to school here. That was a big step for a lot of folks, especially over on Molokai. I have guys in my jail group that I've had over the years for all over the islands, and they said they never were able to fit in their classrooms. And you know what? When you don't fit and you think society doesn't think you're okay, it makes it very, very hard. We need to bring it back, empower our teachers, give them the funding to do what they need to do in a classroom. If tomorrow the federal government was gone and teachers still went to school, they could spend so much more time with their students if they weren't checking the boxes and making sure that no one was left behind. So, well, how do we get there, Scott? How do we get there? We make sure that we reaffirm, and I'm getting text on this right now, we make sure that we reaffirm the 10th Amendment and we bring it back to our state taking care of things. If you're upset with how your school's running, you go to a school board meeting. And you know what parents find out? And I've been reading this all over. I have my daughter and I have my son. They have kids that aren't quite, well, I have one granddaughter that started preschool, kindergarten. But I'm hearing this from my other two boys that have older kids. It says you go to the school board, or you go to the school, you say, well, why isn't my kid learning this? Or why aren't we doing this? And the answer, I mean, it's straight out of the book, says, well, our funding says we need to do this. That's not how education's supposed to work. Education is supposed to work. We need to do this because the kids of Lahaina, the kids of Wailuku, the kids of Kihei, this is how they learn. We need to do it this way. And you up there take care of making sure that my teachers are paid and their administration can take care of the rest. We're doing it backwards. Top-down education doesn't work. As you know, I'm AlohaSwimLessons.com. I teach swimming lessons. I have since the 70s. When I was a teenager, I helped out teaching Red Cross classes. Well, I couldn't bite on that one. So what happened, Scott? Why are you the adaptive swim instructor? Why do you have all the Hollywood people? Why are you having all these famous people come and want to learn to swim from you? Again, even in small things like the Red Cross and the YMCA back in the late 80s, early 90s, remember when they said, we started this top-down from the federal government, Department of Education, and this, and the American Disabilities Act. They said all kids have to be in the classroom despite their disabilities. This, I thought, was a pretty good thing that we needed to make sure everyone was included if they could. But what it did is, that shock wave ran through the Red Cross, that shock wave ran through the YMCA. I was a certified adaptive aquatics instructor until that act that they put upon the Red Cross says we're going to get sued unless we put special needs kids in the water, which was not safe, with other kids in those beginning swimming lessons. So what happened? We have now 35, almost 40 years of swim instructors who never learned how to do adjustment swim lessons that weren't out of the box. So a lot of people never learned to swim. They went to swim lessons. They missed this step or they missed that step. The instructor didn't realize there was an agenda follow, and they just followed that agenda, and if the kid failed, the kid failed. They didn't realize at a very small level, we're talking about swimming here, my passion. You're talking about my passion here. And I teach folks to swim, and I have for decades. But when the folks come to me, I take them back, and we have to unlearn the things that they were taught out of the box that didn't work. And this is the crux. Whenever anybody calls me, good one, anyone ever calls me and says, Scott, I'm 75 years old. I live on Maui. I've never been snorkeling. I've never learned to swim. What can we do? And we go through these steps. And I thought, what happened, this, that, the other? Oh, Uncle threw me in the water. I swallowed a bunch of water when I was like 7 years old, and I never got in the water again. Okay. I tried to take classes. I did this. I did that. I just never fit in. So we have to go back again. Here we go from the education down. We have to start over, and we have to relearn or unlearn things. But the takeaway is that you go 50 years of your life, let's say, and you don't know how to swim. Maybe you don't even know how to read. That's even bigger. If you grew up here on the island and you live in some of the outer areas and the school system was so worried about checking the boxes that somehow you barely learned how to read, if at all, because the system failed you. You're not stupid. If you took somebody who had very poor vision and put them in a classroom and never gave them a pair of glasses to correct their vision and asked them to read from the board, that would be cruel and inhumane punishment. If you took a blind child that was sitting in your class, told them to go to the board and write their name, that would be cruel. But that's basically what we've done with our education system. We've created boxes and said you need to fit in this box. And if you don't fit in that box, the teachers don't have time or the resources because they're filling out paperwork to make sure that the schools get funding. We need to revisit that. We need to revisit the importance of keeping it local. Keep it local. Keep it local. There's been a huge movement over the last, 15 years to grow vegetables at home, having gardens again. When I grew up, we always had a garden. My grandparents had a garden. They were always canning. They were always making sure that they had preserves put away. We got away from that somehow. And now there's homeowners associations on the island that says you can't grow vegetables because it's not pretty. How are we supposed to take care of ourselves if we keep voting in people that don't want us to take care of ourselves? It's a very strange times we're going through. And we don't even realize it. That's the scary part. Well, you can't grow vegetables in that's not what the homeowners want here. They want it to look this way or they want that way. So here we go. Boy, you guys are really blowing it up today. Thank you. I appreciate that. So there's been many landmark cases during the Supreme Court over the last 195 years or so, either challenging or reaffirming who we are, and what we are allowed to do as citizens of these United States. And as long as we make sure that we elect people that want to keep it small, keep it local, keep it as far away from Washington, D.C. as we can, I think we're going to do well. So let's look at, oh goodness, I'm getting my text here, sorry. There's another good question that somebody just brought in. So what would we do if we didn't have federal funding? What would we do if we didn't have federal funding? Well, for one, our teachers' salaries could probably almost double, and we could take care of our teachers in a much better way. There are school districts that have, across the United States, one Albany, Oregon, about 20 years ago, because the school district was, we'll do an audit. We'll find out where we're wasting money. And a group of very concerned parents got together and paid for an independent audit. After that audit, they went to the school board, they went to the state school board, And they got rid of about 127 administrative positions and hired 240 more teachers into the classroom. The people that are delivering education to our kids need to be at the top of our priorities. Their administrators are just moving money. We need to bring it back to making sure our teachers are empowered, have the tools and the resources, and know they're appreciated by their God-given gifts because they went hard to college, learned their skills, and wanted to become teachers. That is a tough field. And the only reason it's tough, it's not for kids, because I taught at-risk programs. Those kids were wonderful. But making sure that somehow they fit in the box was difficult. I have a niece that's a high school principal. I have a niece that's a high school teacher and coach. And when I talk to them, their qualms have never been with the kids. They love the kids. You see a burnout teacher, do they talk about the kids? No, they never do. They talk about what the administration is having them do. How many extra meetings? How many times do we need to reinvent the wheel? When I first started working in juvenile corrections, that was about 1993. I worked at a small facility in Tillamook, Oregon. We had about 24 beds. I was the first new hire in 16 years, so there wasn't a big burnout factor back then in mental health. The kids that were in there were adjudicated, and they were there for at least 18 to 24 months. When I started, there was the camp director, one camp director, assistant director, and then all the staff. We were counselors, we were work study people, we did the whole program in-house. Back then, when the kids that were in there actually started to comply, started to work their programs, we had teachers in there that were fantastic. And they helped the kids get more self-esteem because they were able to do the schoolwork that before they were pushed out of. So during those times, this program was called a level system. It's a brilliant system. I think every correctional system should use one. The kids system that we were working with, kid makes his bed every morning, does it consistently for 2 weeks. Maybe there would be a movie and popcorn on the weekends. The more and better you did, the more you were rewarded. You don't just throw somebody in jail. You don't just throw a kid in juvie and expect them to learn that the harder they work, the more rewards they get. Right now, if we had a correctional system that created awards for doing the program, for doing this, not fighting, going to class, trying. I'm not talking about checking boxes. I'm talking about actually sitting down and figuring out why they didn't learn, and then learning, and then rewarding them. Whether it's a soda pop and a candy bar on a Friday afternoon for doing good all week, whether it needs to be something small each day that they complete something, we need a reward system. When I was a foster dad and a dad all at the same time, and sometimes we had 8 kids in the house, sometimes 9 kids at times, both of my older children were extremely talented and gifted, amazing kids. And what really was an enlightening moment for them was when a couple of my other kids who had been held out of school because they were abandoned in the desert and left alone for a long time, a lot of other mental and other issues which were very difficult, families moving around, the drug and alcohol, reason that kids come into foster care. So when I would reward one of the kids for bringing home a D on a paper, the same as I would reward my daughter, my son, for bringing home an A, They finally, it took them a while. They're going, Dad, why are you being so nice? They just passed. I go, Janelle, excuse me, that's my daughter. I would say, but they made it this far. This far for some people is that far for others. So we need an education system that rewards kids for making progress and reaffirms that. It's not a trophy for everyone. Oh, I could go on that forever. You don't give everyone a trophy just for being there. But you do give them a reward for making an effort. But it cannot be this. Kids today have learned not to fail. They have learned that I'm going to get a trophy. It doesn't matter what I do. If you don't get a trophy, maybe you just get a star that you showed up. That's fine. Yes, it's a small reward. But what that allows our education system to do is go, hey, I'm not really good at math, but I'm really good at writing stories. We're not creating a culture of excellence when we give everyone a trophy. We are creating a culture of mediocrity, and that is a travesty. We cannot have mediocrity and still be a leading nation in the world. We have to have a school system that produces excellence at all fields. From the federal government, Department of Education, as soon as they took over, our education system has floundered for over 50 years. We need to go back, empower our teachers, help kids to learn how to fail so that they can learn how to thrive at what makes that work. If you sat me in a classroom and had me read or dictate, I would be fine. If you sat me in a classroom and tried to tell me how to work out physics problems or higher math, I could probably get lost and muddle through, but I wouldn't come home happy. But if we work on our school systems to reward kids for what they find is good, if you can go out and grow things in your garden and you have a gift for that, the reward is you're going to have wonderful food and it's going to come home to you. If you go out and you're really bad at growing things in your garden, there are no rewards, and that's how life works. But maybe you aren't able to grow things in your garden, but you learn that you're really good at fixing the tools that people need in their garden, and that's how our society comes together. Are you following me here? That's how our society comes together. Maybe you're not a good gardener, but you're really good at fixing the tools that people do gardening with. Take that up. Maybe you've got a giant ranch out there growing thousands of acres of wheat and things like they have on the Big Island. And maybe you're not good at growing that, but you're really good at working on that John Deere. You can make sure that John Deere is ready and you're part of the win. You're part of the win. Because when you were in school, you found out I wasn't good at this, but I'm good at this. Now let's go back to when I was first in that small school on the Oregon coast, and they took away wood shop, they took away auto shop, they took away drafting and home ec. Those were all opportunities for kids to thrive doing something that was different than sitting at a computer. You following me here? How do we build out a country of self-esteem when our system is breaking our kids down instead of building them up? When kids go to class, good comment. When I went to, this one comment here, when I went to school, I wasn't good at doing much of anything, but I had a home ec class, and now I've owned a restaurant for the last 40 years. But my passion was cooking and baking. I can't say who that is on island, but you probably know. And they've done it very, very well and been very successful. We need to go back to, if you're teaching up country, you know your kids. If you're teaching over at Lahaina Luna, you know your kids. You know how to reach them the best way. I was there was one of these moments in my life. I'm just going to digress to a funny moment. So back in the 80s, when I was hired to come over and lifeguard and teach private swim lessons at the Hyatt Regency, I think it was 81. And I was so excited. My friend Linda, who teaches over at Baldwin, we were in college together. She said, "Oh, go over. You lifeguard for my brother over in Maui." And I go, "Cool. Been to Maui. Love Maui." Came over, living at the Maui Islander. Rent was like $300. We had a 3-bedroom condo. It was really nice, affordable. And I was lifeguarding and teaching private lessons. But I was off. I grabbed my surfboard, and I went down to surf just off the boat. Oh Lord, it's escaping me. But I was off. Kigamea 3, the grade school that we lost during the fire. And I was out there, I paddled out, and I kind of had it to myself. And then school got out. And here's all these boys, and some girls came out that were just so tall, and they paddled out. And growing up, I thought I was a halfway decent surfer. And I got schooled by kids that are 10 and 11 years old. And I kind of got out of the water and kind of sheepishly went back and kind of went and I said, "Man, I came to Maui because I really wanted to surf and be good, and I'm watching all these kids, and they were so talented, and they were so young." Can you make a living surfing? Some people do. But what the ocean teaches you, the ocean has lots of lessons to teach us. And this is what, when people come to me and it's got them, I love coming to the islands. I only get ankle deep in the water. I'm afraid of the ocean. The ocean is a constant. It constantly teaches you that things change and you need to adapt. The ocean teaches you that. Growing up on the islands, if you were blessed enough to be able to surf, scuba, spearfish, the ocean teaches us lessons. We listen to it. When you're coming in and you've got 3 little sets, or you got a set of 3 waves coming in front of you, you know the sound, you know the feeling, and you know the surge that's going to feel that you're just going to walk right out safely behind the 3rd swell. And you know that feeling. You know it. But you also know that there may be a drawback on maybe the 2nd wave. And you need to hold fast for that because you see that coming because the ocean is your teacher. Do we teach that in our school systems? Possibly. Can you learn that by failing? You sure can. You can rush to the beach and get slammed. If you're at Big Beach and you get slammed by one of those shore breaks, it just flattens you onto the ground. You're going to learn. Hopefully you don't get really badly injured. But the ocean can teach us. It's the greatest gift we have living here in Hawaii is our ocean. It's the greatest teacher. It can feed us. It can help us learn that there are things greater than we are that we can be a part of and create a harmonious balance. I truly miss driving back from by Doc Fleming's all the way through Hanakauai and smelling the pineapple. I miss making that turn towards Ottawalu and smelling the cane and just smelling the wet leaves from a rain shower that came in, driving all the way to the Poly. I miss the drive on Veterans when there was cane on all sides of the field and we had a product. We were being one with our island. We weren't told what to do with it. So, as we're down to our last 10 minutes here, I've gone a long way. Remember, though, we are all in this elevator called our republic. One line of the elevator that keeps us safe goes to the federal government. Another line goes to the state. Another line goes to the county. And another line goes to our cities. But remember, the most important line to keep us safe is to keep our city and our county and our state solvent, away from the meddling of the federal government. We don't want them to teach our kids. It's failed. As I said, I know very well, I've learned a lot from living with the Native American for the last 10 years. I have learned of the anger and the frustration. Do you know if you get hurt on the Navajo Nation, and, you know, it could be a serious injury, you're going to go and sit in a clinic, and then that clinic has to say whether you can go to the hospital and whether the federal tribe will pay. You can't just go to the emergency room. I mean, it's a failed system. We can see it. It's right there. It's a showcase of what a failure looks like. One size does not fit all. The person is the point at which we make change. If we have a student that learns this way, then we need to be able to have the space, the resources meaning individuals who love to teach, that maybe they can only work with 2 or 3 students because those students need to learn this way. They're as smart, they're as intelligent, but they need to learn a different way. We need to empower that. We don't need to throw money at it. We need to make sure that we're creating the environment that creates very strong, very independent, very connected people to our islands. Instead, we're checking the boxes, making sure that we pass federal and state mandated exams so that we can get graded as a county, we get graded as a state, we get graded as a country for how we're doing in education. When it really comes down to is making sure that our teachers have the tools for success and not telling them, I'm going to open a book and you're going to teach this book and you're going to go page by page by page and everyone's going to learn, because that doesn't work. And that's what we've been doing for 50 years. It's not helped our labor pool. It has not helped our economic stability. And we keep going down the same road. It used to be, and we're starting to see the turn in the corner, that each state was so independent that if one state was doing one thing, other states would look at that state and go, what are they doing that's being so successful? They're solvent. They've got a transit system that works. They've got a school system where kids are excelling and moving on and learning. What is that state doing different? How can we model what they're doing? What are we doing differently so that we can adjust? So what our system has done, back to Jefferson, Madison, Ellsworth, our states are little laboratories where at the time it was written, people from the business community, people from the education community would take time out and be leaders and run our local governments, our state and our legislature. They weren't career politicians. They were people that were going, I did something successful on the outside of government. I want to bring those tools to the inside of government. We haven't done that, people. We stepped away from it. We stepped a long way away from it, and we need to get back to it. It's not about just being compliant. It's about being successful. You can be compliant and successful, but we need to teach our kids how to fail. And if we teach them how to fail, we need to look so that they go, I played football for a few years in high school. I was so crappy. Oh my God, it just didn't click in my head. But I swam for Ty Steinbach, an Olympic coach. In college, I swam for Lee Howard, a Pan American Games coach. My last year's coaching in Los Alamos, New Mexico, I was coaching with John Murphy, a gold medal backstroke swimmer who swam the medley with Mark Spitz. I have seen what excellence looks like in the water, how excellent coaches bring out incredible skills. Not everyone is meant for any particular thing. We all know that. We each have our fortes. I can tell you, with all the kids I have one kid that was only with us for a very short time. I thought he was going to be a rap star. He had so much talent. I hope he actually listens to this. I still click his videos every once in a while. You know, and the kids all have talent. It's absolutely, you find the talent within the kids, and then you water that garden. If you keep watering the concrete, it's not going to grow. Some kids need to go this way, or that way. When you hire somebody to do a job for you, you don't want to be checking federal boxes to make sure that's the right person. You want to hire somebody that's going to help your business evolve, become stronger, become better. Here in Hawaii, if you're going to work in the tourist industry, you better, by goodness sakes, have the skills to meet and talk with people and share the Aina life. You need to be able to be part of what Maui is, what Wailuku is, what Kihei is. We are all unique and different in many ways. And we need to be celebrated for our differences. We don't need to be pushed into boxes to say we're successful. So we're running down here the last few minutes. Let me see if I have any other questions I can grab here certainly at the last second. Okay. Well, this one's really big. Somebody asked me, because we've been on the Constitution, we've been under the Bill of Rights, we've been under that, and somebody asked me about the First Amendment. They said, how is it we have the First Amendment and then without any legislative process that we were told we couldn't go to church, we couldn't gather, but yet we could go to Walmart, Home Depot? That's a really good question, Dan. For the life of me, that's questioned me a lot. Again, last week I talked about agency. We have created so many 3- and 4-letter agencies. Well, it's time to go. Guys, I will come back to that question, Dan, next week. But hey, this is Scott for KAKU 88.5 Maui. I'm going to send it your way. You guys have a blessed day, and we will see you soon. Aloha.